The question I wanted to ask you all, on television, I listened to a marine toxicologist describe the oil globules that drop down below the slick, killing everything down to the bottom. And I hadn't really realized when I saw the slick, that's what I thought was there, and that was the lethal part of it. Yeah. But there is a column, there is a vertical column. Everywhere there's a slick, then there's oil sinking.
Well,
and that's why so much life is destroyed, and why it may take 3 or more years.
It'd probably take a lot longer.
Restoration, or
absolutely,
Well, what they're trying to use some chemical dispersant even below the water to try to.
Are they?
And apparently, this chemical is toxic to marine life too.
Well,
I don't think they're releasing the actual chemical substance that they're using. I don't know why they won't tell us.
They're keeping that secret?
Yeah, I don't know why. Apparently, it's a toxic substance, and I don't know why they would need to keep that secret from us. I mean, but.
Well, it's so toxic.
I think once again what you're seeing here is sort of a tragedy of really epic proportions here, and
they don't know what to do.
Well, it's exactly right. No one knows what to do at this point. I mean, the oil is free flowing from the bottom of the ocean at 10,000 gallons per hour, and it's going to continue to flow for months. I mean, it's going to flow for months. They don't know how to stop it at this time. There's a lot more oil that's going to come out as this oil makes it on shore. If it makes it into the marshes of the Gulf Coast. If it makes it onto the tourist beaches of the Redneck Riviera and elsewhere in Western Florida,
can go down the Keys,
and it could actually be carried into the Florida Keys, get on the Florida Reef Tract. It could make it to the Western Bahamas and foul beaches in Western Bahamas. It depends how much oil comes out, how long it flows out, and what the weather conditions are going to be.
I mean, even
going forward here. But the fishing industry in the Gulf Coast, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry that's going to be affected, and we, what we're seeing here is really competing economic needs. We all unfortunately thrive off the product that's being produced out of the Gulf of Mexico. We all benefit in many ways from that energy resource that comes out, and being unable to change our own behavior and wean ourselves off of our dependence on these resources, we're going to continue to exploit these things in the future. But we're seeing now that there's other impacts that come from this, particularly when an accident like this takes place. We may well foul beaches and destroy a tourist economy that exists that's very important also to the United States, and particularly to those states in the Gulf region anyway. And also, we're going to destroy the fisheries potentially. If this oil makes it into the marshes and comes in large quantities, these marshes could be contaminated for decades. I mean, really, you think about that, being able to harvest oysters or shrimp or other fish. Most of the commercially valuable fish in the Gulf spend, they either breed in the marshes or they spend part of their life in the marshes, as do shellfish, oysters and shrimp and whatnot. And so this is a large scale ecological catastrophe.
Could be the worst environmental disaster ever.
It's quite extraordinary, and it propagates through the entire ecosystem and through the entire human ecosystem. I mean, people who live in the Gulf Coast who depend on tourism dollars. There's a lot of money that goes down there.
With the economy the way it is already, I mean, this isn't going to be helpful.
And it's not just the people who run resort hotels and are directly involved in tourism, but all the other people who support those industries as well are going to be affected.
I think what's interesting is you mentioned how oil benefits us, and certainly we need energy, and that's necessary for our economy right now. But it was interesting. A BP official was on NPR this morning, and he admitted that very likely this could go on for weeks or months, and we're going to have, millions of gallons could come out. And what he said, and I think it's not a true statement, and this is an important point, is that we need to be doing these drilling projects, and this is a good thing. He said energy security. He says that we need to. Oil and offshore drilling is important for America's energy security, and I would say that's not true. I mean, if you look at what's happening, this is undermining our security, our economic national security, and if you look at oil in terms of war, and I mean, it's arguable some of our Middle East wars are oil is a part of that equation. And I would argue that, and wherever oil is around the world, it encourages dictatorships, and if it doesn't encourage dictatorships there, either our government or other governments often support dictators that have oil. And I think oil actually makes us insecure. It's energy insecurity, and I think that, I mean, you mentioned that people need to start using less oil, but I think that really the individuals don't necessarily have the power. I mean, we have a power to drive less or to ride bikes and walk more, things like that. But the way our cities are designed, I mean, it's hard for individuals to really get off oil. It really takes a matter of our national federal government to really push and drive our society to collectively get off oil. And we really need leadership from the national government especially. And we're not getting that, and the question is why?
Well, you're right. I mean,
there's answers to that.
You're right, and I think I might be able to answer your question about what the government, the problem with the government not taking,
why we can't get off oil. I mean,
the problem is right now is our whole economy is based on cheap, plentiful fossil fuels. This is like a fossil fuel, petroleum economy that we have right now. Everything is linked somehow to oil.
Petrochemical agriculture.
Whether it's our food, whether it's our
housing materials,
all of the materials that we use.
Let's look around this room and probably
all of our plastics, everything. And so we built this economy, this whole economy on this idea that we would continue to have cheap, plentiful fossil fuels, and we went so far as to, I believe, to be antagonistic and start wars in the Middle East to protect our interests there. We have a huge military budget, and you could argue that military budget is really an oil subsidy, oil subsidy to protect our oil markets in the Middle East. And our dollar is intricately linked to the price of oil and to oil trading oil. Oil is traded in U.S. dollars. It gives our dollar the liquidity and it gives our dollar its value, for international investors. And so you look at that, and so almost everything about being American and our American lifestyle, it's just you're only a couple steps away. You're always just a couple steps away from what made that possible, and it's this fossil fuel economy that allows all this consumption.
What's interesting though is that so America reached peak oil in 1970s, and we've increasingly had to go to.
But we knew in the 50s that we were going to reach it in the 70s.
Well, we reached that, and we've had to be more and more dependent on foreign oil. And the International Energy Agency actually said that. That we would probably reach peak oil worldwide in 2030. 2030, but there was whistleblowers just in the last few months or last year that said that we've likely already reached peak
there's
oil.
There's a lot of people saying now that we peaked out around 2006, 2008. 2008.
So we really
around that time period, the world kind of peaked out, and on paper. There's only 2 countries in the world now that haven't reached peak oil, and that's Saudi Arabia and Iraq.
I mean, that's the reason. That's the reason we're in these really deep waters. I think drilling for oil is because we've already drained a lot of the oil that's easy to access and it's cheap to. It's expensive to go drill miles under the floor, but we've already drained a lot of the cheapest, easiest to access oil.
But I want to back to your question about what's wrong with the government? Why is it not doing anything? And I think that's that's a little bit of the problem. That I think that we shouldn't just we want to see the government do something. But I think what it's really going to take is on at least what we can do right now is take control of our own lives.
Right. I mean that's part of the equation. But I think the biggest part is really we've got to, the government really needs to be more powerfully representing the public, the people's interest, instead of special interests. I mean, part of it is,
of course,
it's really all about money in the elections. I mean, there's evidence here. I mean, the oil companies were donating BP was donating large amount of money to Ken Salazar before he became Interior Secretary. And so, I mean, these oil companies and these Wall Street firms and these health insurance firms, they're all donating millions of dollars to our campaigns. They're buying our government, in a sense. And so our government's representing special interests before the people's interests.
So that doesn't stop until, we, being American citizens,
fix our elections.
demand a better government.